Received her first flower from a boy at that party, a yellow rose from Stephen Kemper. She also got a Barbie doll ski jump. Here we see Dad putting the piece together while Jim looks on. Bert was getting a little bigger. Our neighbors across the street, Marie and Bob Harmon, had a horse. I believe this is Southern Comfort having his shoes changed. The horse being worked on while one of the neighborhood kids looks on.
Picture of Cape Kennedy. I had a trip for screening electronic equipment, and we just took this picture to show that a bird also eats at the same table as you do. Crow still eating while everyone else left. Picture of the NASA building that houses our big space rockets. One of the big Caterpillar catwalks that they put the big rockets on, and they walk them up to the space pad. Rockets at the museum, just showing the different stages. To one of our big rockets. The LEM, the landing module for the moon, built by Grumman. Rocket engine with Pat Galini and Nelson Tyler, two of the men who came with me to the Cape. A closer picture of the LEM with me standing at the hatch. It's a smaller rocket engine, if you want to call it small. All our military rockets, just showing, they were all standing up just to show you how big they are compared to the building. Military launch pads. So I'm assuming one of them, I think, is the Titan.
This is the wedding of Teresa Palermo and her first husband, Ronnie. Ronnie and Teresa and the bridal party at the door of St. Joseph's Church in East Patchogue. Anne Marie outside the church talking to her Aunt Anne. This was the year that we took our trip to Kansas. Here we see the Mississippi River taken on a bridge from the car. A picture of the road sign identifying the Mississippi River. This is a picture of Mike's front yard and the archway leading to the back. The archway is very dark, but it was totally out of lava rock. This is Heidi sitting on the front porch of Mike's house. No comment. And Mike outside Debbie's house. This is the first time we had met Mike Murchison. Heidi and Mike. This is Mike's car parked in the parking lot outside a restaurant where we went for dinner. 4th of July in Kansas. On a country road, we were setting off firecrackers. These are the grain elevators in Hutchinson. They are supposed to be among the largest in the world, I believe, maybe second to the USSR. This is one end of the building. This is the center section of the building. End. It's a picture of Dad cleaning Mike's pool. In the pool, hanging on to the steps. Friends of Debbie and Mike's, Regina and Bob Sims. He swims while Mike looks on. He drove everyone crazy diving into the pool this way. She would jump about 3 inches out and every time almost hit her chin. Regina and Debbie racing the length of the pool. The other end we see Bob Sims standing, Heidi on Mike's shoulders. Debbie sunbathing. Dad and Deb around the picnic table at the side of the pool. Debbie takes the sun while Dad cleans. Heidi and Mike's next door neighbor, George. In the back we see Dad and Deb by the picnic table. George and Heidi taking in the sun. And Heidi at the table. Mike and a friend of his in the pool. Mike trying to impress Debbie's parents. We visited one of the parks in the area. Here we see Heidi hanging by her legs from one of the gymnastic poles. Heidi, Mom, and Deb on the swings. Heidi and Deb on the Donald Duck merry-go-round. The family standing by one of the reflecting pools at the park. An Indian village at the park. It's on that trip that we spent a day at Regina Sims' parents' farm. As we pulled into the yard, we were greeted by one of the family peacocks on the roof of the barn. Of the acreage as it could be seen from the farmhouse. Regina showing us some more of the acreage. One crossed the stream. We see Regina and Debbie going across on the rope. Regina doing some tricks. He got to ride Old Blue while Regina led the horse. And Heidi watched while Regina feeds the horses. Another one of the family horses outside the barn. Regina's dad and mother took us out to help them mow the wheat. Here we see a combine in the field. Look very closely, you can see me working on the combine. Another picture of the mowing. As the combine comes in with all the cut wheat, it is dumped in the back of the truck. Here we see the process. When this was done, Regina's mom and dad took the grain into the grain elevators that we saw earlier. On our way home from Kansas, we stopped in Belle Vernon, Pennsylvania. It was a little bit after our anniversary, but Patty Ream had prepared an anniversary party for us. Eating Dad the cake. David Kreitzer eating some of our cake. It was on this trip that we had the Ream family reunion. Here we see Carol, Grandma Beatty, Susan, and David. Some of those attending the reunion are, down in front we see Heidi. Directly in back of Heidi, one of Bob Ream's daughters, I don't know whether it's Beth or Gretchen. Linda Ream, in front of her, Mary Beth Ream. Then we have Susan. In front of Susan is the other of Bob's daughters, either Beth or Gretchen. Then we have Jim in the yellow shirt. Standing in the back, me holding David, Carol, Uncle Pete, Bob, Aunt Mildred, Grandma Beatty, and Henry. All of the cousins were there, except for Harold. We see Linda, me, Bob, Carol, and Henry. Harold is the one with the hat. A picture of Pete and Mildred and their family. Left to right, Bob. In front of Bob, his wife Karen. Pete, one of Bob's daughters, Beth or Gretchen, next to her the other one. Then we have Mildred. In back of Mildred we have Art and Linda. The family of Henry Reen. Henry Reen Jr., Patty, Mary Beth, and a friend of the family, Marguerite. These are Bob's two girls, along with Mary Beth in the striped shirt and Heidi in the middle. A view of the family sitting around waiting for dinner to be served. Today was Henry at the barbecue. This is the Mabel Ream family. From left to right we have Jim in the yellow shirt, Perry holding David, me in the white shirt, next to me Susan, next to Susan Doug holding Heidi, in back of Doug Carol, and in back of Carol Grandma Beatty. Grandma got so nervous drinking cherry soda that she spilled it down the front of her dress. Here we have her sitting with a sign covering the stain. The sign says, "Let me tell you about my grandchildren." Part of the day's activities included sports, the Reams against the Reamless, which were the in-laws. Here we say Linda and Jim playing ball with Mary Beth and Heidi. In the background we see Art about to serve for a badminton game. In the front we see to the right, in the right corner, Grandma Beatty's head, and in the left corner Aunt Mildred. This is a picture of the Reamless side of the net. Another picture of the family sitting around eating. Again, the Reamless side of the net. I still have not figured out how they managed to beat us so badly. The group around the tables. One of Bob's daughters holding David. An out-of-focus picture of the Ream side of the net. Now you know why we lost. Bob's daughter holding David. Henry, Patty, Mary Beth, Marguerite, and Henry's uncle on his mother's side, Don Bedsworth. The Ream side of the net, once again out of focus. A rather dark picture of Mildred and Marguerite with David asleep in the stroller. Now we go to Christmas at the Perry household. I believe this was the first year we had the nativity scene that I made. This is all ceramic, and it took me 8 months to do all the pieces. The stockings on the chimney waiting for Santa, waiting to be opened. A kitchen set, stove, refrigerator, sink, and cupboard. Christmas Eve of that year was at Perry and Helen's house in Patchogue. Here we see Uncle Perry at the far end of the table, and next to him in the back, Grandpa Romano, Lois, and then Chrissy. Uncle Lou, Aunt Marie, me, Debbie and Mike were here that year. You can see Mike at the end. On the right-hand side, Bob Delia, Josephine, and the back of Chrissy's head. Here we have young Bob looking on as a picture is taken of me, Debbie, and Mike. Sitting in the living room, Bob, Louie, Joe, and Louie. Helen talks with Debbie and Mike. Heidi provides the entertainment. Helen chatting with someone. In the back, I'm sitting, Nanny, and Chrissy on the fireplace. Grandpa James Romano and Helen's father. Nanny modeling one of her Christmas presents. Heidi looking around at the presents she received from Santa. Debbie and Mike showing off t-shirts they got. Mom looking very unconcerned that Heidi got a new watch. Christmas night entertainment. Ralph to the left, Heidi, Mike, Debbie, and Jim's arm on the right. Tell you about my grandchildren. I believe the sign was put on to cover up the cherry soda that she spilled down the front of her dress. Here we have Jim, Linda, Heidi, and I think Mary Beth playing some game in the yard in front of the greenhouses. It was decided that at this reunion we would have team competition. We would have the Reams, those are the blood relatives, and the Reamless, the in-laws. The competition would be against those two factions. Here we have the badminton game in progress. I will only say once that the Reams were badly beaten by the Reamless. The family sitting around eating and talking. Two members of the Reamless group, Dad and Uncle Jack. How they won, I'll never know. Some more of the group mingling around. One of Bob's daughters, either Gretchen or Beth, holding David. Some more of the badminton game. One of the Ream girls holding David again. Henry, Patty, Mary Beth, Marguerite, and Don Bedsworth, who is Henry's uncle on his mother's side. Some more of the badminton game. At least Henry looked professional. Very dark picture of Aunt Mildred, Marguerite, and little David in his stroller. Christmas, 1977. Seem to think this is the first year that we had the nativity scene, which I made. These are all ceramic pieces that took me 8 months to make the entire scene. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care. Some of the packages that were on display prior to opening on Christmas Day. Packages on the other side, as well as what Santa left. One of the gifts was a stove and kitchen combination for Heidi. Christmas Eve that year was at Helen and Perry's. Here we have Uncle Perry. In the rear by the fireplace, we can see just the top of Mr. Romano's head, Loie, and Chrissy. Around the table from left to right, Uncle Louie, Aunt Marie, me. Debbie and Mike were home that year. We see Mike at the end of the table. In the right-hand corner, Bob, the back of Joey's head, and Chrissy. A semi-family portrait, I guess you would call it. Mom, Deb, Mike, with little Bob looking on. Some of the D'Elia family sitting around chatting. Bob, Loie, Josephine, and Uncle Louie. Aunt Helen talking to Debbie and Mike. Heidi providing the entertainment. Family sitting around the living room. Aunt Helen. The far end, me, Nanny in the red and white smock, and Chrissy sitting on the fireplace. Grandpa James Romano, Aunt Helen's father. Nanny modeling her new brunch coat. Heidi on Christmas morning with her doll in front of her stove set. I see to the side her snow shovel. Debbie and Mike showing the t-shirts that they got, having something to do with a handsome prince. Look at the smile on Mike's face. Heidi got a wristwatch that year. Mom doesn't look too thrilled about it. Sitting around playing Monopoly. Left to right, Ralph, Heidi, Mike, Debbie, and Jim's arm. 1978. Early that year we had a very heavy snow. As you can see from this picture and others that are to come, it was almost up to the seats on the swings out by the barn. Heidi standing on the front porch on top of the unshoveled snow. You can see the height of it there as her head almost reaches the glass in the door. Heidi in front of the house. Heidi by the playhouse alongside the swing set. More of the same. Rather dark picture showing the drifting in front of the house. 1978 was the year of our 25th wedding anniversary, and the children gave us a surprise party, supposedly. Here we see Don Pipe, Emil Wenner, and Frank Schmidt talking. Jim and Ralph doing the cooking. Ralph looks adorable in his apron. Underneath the canopy, a picture of all the aunts. There's Nanny, Aunt Catherine, Aunt Louisa, Aunt Phoebe, and in front we have Aunt Marie. Picture of the dessert table with the cake. In back we see Emil Wenner and Don Pipe talking shop. Some of the guests sitting around in front. In the red dress we have Catherine Balsamo talking to Aunt Helen. In the back, from left to right, there's Lucretia Drum, Frank Drum, Uncle Tony Stevens, Uncle Louie Gallo, Benny Balsamo, and in the lawn chair in front of them is Grandpa Romano. Aunt Helen still talking to Catherine Balsamo over at the left. Ronnie Knopp, Chicky Murphy, Aunt Marie, and with her back to us, Charlotte Milletta. Underneath the canopy we have, from left to right, in the rear, Pat Pipe, Rosemary Schmidt. Then we begin the picture of the aunts. Right here in front, Aunt Marie, and over to the right, Lucretia Drum. Don Pipe, Frank Schmidt, Emil Wenner, and to the right, looking on, Al Elia. This must have been the stag table. We have Benny Balsamo, Joe Knopp, Joe Murphy, Tony Sabu Milletta, Uncle Perry in the back. And sitting in front, profile, is Uncle Louis Delia. The bride and the groom cutting the cake. Another picture of the stag table. Benny Balsamo walking over to join Joe Gallo, Joe Knopp, Joe Murphy, Sabu, and Frank Schmidt. Another shot of the women underneath the canopy. A shot of the whole crowd. This was the year that Greg Murphy married Lucy. Here we see Greg getting out of the car in front of Mount Carmel Church in Patchogue, and Timmy standing in front. Joseph as he walks his mother and father down the aisle. Joseph's wife, Regina, as she enters the church. Lucy on the arm of her father. And Greg as they come back up the aisle after the ceremony. Aunt Louisa congratulating the bride and the groom. The wedding party as they stand in the doorway of Mount Carmel Church. Now we have Russell Klein and Heidi across the street with Marie Harmon riding Southern Comfort. Heidi's from school, Dina Damboyce on top Southern Comfort. Heidi, Comfy, and Marie Harmon. Heidi, Comfy, and Marie. Heidi on the horse. In August of that year, Debbie and Mike were married in Kansas. Here we have a picture of the altar in the church prior to the ceremony. Heidi was a flower girl, and friends of Debbie and Mike's sons were Rice Boy and Page Boy or whatever. And here we have a picture of them outside the church prior to the ceremony. Another picture of the three little ones outside the church. A rather dark picture of the girls. We see from left to right, Regina, who was maid of honor, Debbie, Debbie's soon-to-be sister-in-law Lisa, and at the far end, Mary Jane Fitz. In front we have Heidi. Another rather dark picture of the three little ones. One of the boys holding the rice, Heidi the flowers, and the other little boy the scrolls. Mike's mother, Leona, Debbie, and me. Mary Jane Fitz inside the church. Heidi and I. Prior to the ceremony. Debbie showing off her garter to her friends. Regina, Debbie, Lisa, Mary Jane, and Heidi. Another view of the altar. Cake. Debbie and Mike at the reception following the ceremony. Mike looking rather bewildered. Mike and Debbie toasting. Toast. The groom feeds the bride. Do another toast. As they were leaving the church, Debbie and Mike in the car that the boys had decorated. Brother Dennis admiring his artwork. Dennis taking a lot of pride in what he has done. Even the police department got in on the decorating. They're taken of an athletic arena in Wichita This was taken from the window of the motel where we stayed. Jim thought he could fool everyone by making them believe he had taken a picture from the plane window. This was the shot that he took from a wall display at the airport. Plane getting ready to board. Picture of Kansas as it looks from the air. Lake Michigan, taken from the plane. Chicago stockyards, taken from the plane. I think we're a little ahead of ourselves here. This is a picture of, I believe, Shea Stadium in New York as we were coming into land. Ralph getting off the plane at transfer time in Dayton, Ohio. Out of the airport at Dayton. Also the year that Ralph and Debbie were married. Prior to the ceremony, we see Mom, Heidi, and Bert posing for a picture. The men in the wedding party, Debbie's brother-in-law, Tony, Ralph, and Debbie's brother, Anthony. Ralph and I. At the wedding, Loie and Nanny get into the fun. Behind them we can see Chicky and Joe. Also getting into the swing of things, we see Aunt Marie. I think she's dancing with Aunt Helen and Uncle Perry. To the left, we see Nanny and Christina with her back to us. Head table, Heidi, and one of the bridesmaids, Debbie's sister-in-law, Libby. Bride and the groom. Dad carrying drinks back to the table. Table 1, we see Uncle Perry's arm around Aunt Helen, Louie, Marie sitting next to him, Nanny, Grandma Beatty, and me. Table 3, some of our guests, Joe Knopp, Sabu, Charlotte Noletta, Sully and Marge Palermo, and the back of Chicky Murphy's head. Heidi dancing with Debbie's nephew Michael. Loie taking Dad for a whirl. Debbie feeding Ralph wedding cake. Wedding cake. Daddy's little girl, Debbie and her dad. A picture of the nativity scene that I made. This was immediately following Ralph's wedding, being they were married in December. Here we see the living room with the new furniture and Mom standing in the corner. A view of the furniture, another piece of the furniture. Decorated mantelpiece in the kitchen. 1979. In the summer of this year, Alex Elia married Robin Bello. Here we have a picture of Alex as he gets out of the car and approaches the church in Ronkonkoma. Terry and Al as they are escorted down the aisle in the church. Robin as she enters the church on the arm of her father. And Alex as they come back up the aisle after being pronounced man and wife. The throwing of the rice. Alex and Robin as they enter the reception, which was held at the Crest Hollow Country Club in Woodbury. Robin's brother and his wife. Mr. and Mrs. Bello dancing. The bride and groom dancing. Dancing some more. There's a story behind this picture. This is for our children who have heard Mrs. Elia speak so often about Blackie. We never really believed that Blackie existed, but here we have a picture of Terry and Blackie. And groom cutting the cake. Alex dancing with his mother. Hopefully you will be able to see this rather dark picture. Toward the end of the reception, the men in the wedding party stripped down to athletic shorts, and the girls put on grass skirts. Here we have the wedding party doing a dance. Terry dancing with one of the semi-stripped ushers. This is a picture of the Sino family, the cousins of Alex. From left to right in the back, we have Linda's husband, Linda, young Anthony, his girl, and Alex. Seated in the front is Debbie and her husband. 1980. Jim graduated from West Liberty State College in Wheeling, West Virginia in May of 1980. Traveling to the college with us to surprise Jim were Mr. and Mrs. Wenner and Mr. and Mrs. Verney. Here we see Jim as he realizes the Wenners and the Verneys have come to attend his graduation. Jim in the back hugging the Wenners, Heidi and Debbie approaching the crowd. Inside the motel, everyone relaxing and congregating in one room, we have Emil Wenner, Del Wenner, Heidi and David on the bed reading or coloring, and Mom to the left talking. This was taken inside the cafeteria at the college. Sitting around the table we have Heidi, Mike, Mom, Jim Verney, Mary Verney, now Debbie, and Del Wenner. Back at the motel, Debbie and Mom showing Jim some pictures. Mary Verney's back is to us, Jim Verney sitting in the rear of the picture. Here we have Jack Monak entertaining the crew. Down in the left-hand corner we see Mike. In the back, Grandma Beatty. Jack is telling a joke about Magic Johnson. Emil, Del, and Mary Verney. Table at the college cafeteria. Myself, Jim Verney, Mary Verney, Debbie, Del Wenner, and Emil Wenner. View from the bleachers, looking down upon the graduates at the auditorium, or the gym where the graduation took place. A picture of the podium with the West Liberty seal in back. Jim's roommate, Dave Meyer, as he returns to his seat after receiving his diploma. This was a classmate of Jim's after she had received her diploma. We had met her earlier in the weekend, and I'm sure the reason I took the picture was because she comes from Pennsylvania. After the ceremony, a picture of the family. Isn't it amazing that Jim could graduate from college when he has such a retarded mother? Still not the greatest looking. Mom seems to have perked up a little bit. Then we have the retarded grandmother. Jim, Dad, and Heidi standing in front. We can never seem to get a full compliment here. Mom, Grandma seems as though shaped up a little bit. Jim is still smiling. Now Dad is got a frown on his face. This is the motley crew that palled around together at West Liberty. Left to right, Yellow Jacket, we have Roy Burford. Dave Sheets, Dave Meyer, Jim, and Jim Tiano. Just kept trying. Dad hasn't perked up any on this one either. If we can't get a good one of the family, we'll go back to the crazies again. Roy, Dave, Jim, and Jim. Roy, Dave, Jim, and Jim. Picture of my favorite of all at West Liberty, Astro. My back to the camera and Jim looking on. Graduation, a dinner reception was held for Jim at Figueretti's in Wheeling. Left-hand corner we see Carol and Jack, then we see David, Heidi peeking out, and Doug. The rest are a little bit blurred, we'll get to them later on. On the right-hand side we see Debbie, me, and in the front here, the back of Jim's head. Now we get a view of the other end of the table. We see the top of Emil Winter's head, Dell, Grandma Beatty. On the other side we see Doug and Mike. Another view of the table, Grandma Beatty in the left-hand corner, a pregnant Susan, Debbie. On the right we see Mike, and further down Aunt Carol. Right after Jim's graduation, Heidi, now in the 3rd grade, had the starring part in the school play Peter Pan. Here we have, on the right, Tinkerbell, played by Debbie Aragona, then Debbie, and then 2 of the other members of the cast, one an Indian, and the other one of the children, I guess. In the cafeteria prior to the play, we have Debbie Aragona on the right, Heidi, and Margaret Nabel. Taken during the play, Heidi and Debbie Aragona. Picture of the cast lingering around in the cafeteria before the play. Heidi during the play, during one of her songs. This was taken during I Won't Grow Up. Heidi and her friend Ella Jenkins. One of the Indians and Heidi during the play. Emoting during one of her songs. If I remember correctly, the name of this song was Ugabug. Heidi and Debbie Aragona in the cafeteria. See Margaret off to the side, Heidi doing one of her songs. It was taken after the play. Michael Mooney had accompanied us to see the play, and Heidi is holding a rose that was given to her by the cast and but handed to her by Garrett Fabrizio. This is Heidi and her 1st grade teacher, Miss Ensel. This is a very dark picture, but Grandma was here at the time to see the play, and this is a picture of her sitting around the kitchen table. In honor of her performance, I had made her a Peter Pan plate at ceramics. Whether this was a flashback or going ahead, but these are 3 pieces that I also made Heidi at ceramics. This was the year of my 30th class reunion. Pictured here we see Pat Johnson, Lusick and her husband Pete, and Jim Ralston on the right. To the left we see the back of Anne Flakehart Patera talking to Diane Isley Jones. Sitting around the table, we have Pat, Pete, me, Helen Presco, Nancy Travis Van Goyder, Anne Louise, and just in the corner, Bob Gibb. Anne Louise, Bob Gibb, I think it's Lola hidden beside Bob, Diane, Patty, and Pete. Picture of the head table. To the far left, Mary Ann and Jim Ralston, and Connie and Jim Mandarino. Violet Santel, Norma Johnson, and in the rear, Jack Janasik. On the right-hand side of the table, Dorothy Anderchek Janasik, Tommy Black, and Buster Beeman. You've been out of school for 30 years, you kind of forget the faculty. I believe that is Bessie Preston, the Dean of Women. Mr. Fellman, he was the gym teacher, and I think that's Miss Lowe, the Spanish teacher. Was not drinking. Me and Dottie. Dorothy, Jim Mandarino, Patty, and me looking over the shoulder. Ah, there's Hank Mormy, Mom's high school sweetheart, Mom, Bob Biddle, and his wife Jean. Anne Flakehart talking to Bob Gibb. Nancy and I talking to Jim Ralston. We were sure Mary Ann Ralston was looking on, Nancy and I giving Jim a kiss. I flew home from the reunion to attend the wedding of Kathy Knopp and Benny Balsamo. Here we have Dad and I sitting at the table at the wedding. Me and Benny dancing. In the front, facing us in the left corner, is one of the Bayer girls. I don't know whether it's Joanne or not. Bride and groom at the head table. Heidi and Jennifer Weberly in our backyard. The year that Jill married Frank. Here we have Aunt Helen and Uncle Perry getting out of the car at the Methodist Church on South Ocean Avenue in Patchogue. Jill, as she arrives at the church, with Katie Summers, her maid of honor, helping her. I'm not sure exactly where this was taken, but a picture of Jill and Frank. As she prepares to walk down the aisle at the church. Jill and Frank, Jill's godfather, who is Dad, and her godmother, who is her Aunt Corrine. The mother and father of the bride. And guests, Ralph in the back, Bob D'Elia, and Leslie, Bob's wife, who had an eye injury and a patch over her eye. Jill and Frank cutting the cake. Another view. The bride feeds the groom. Feeds the bride. Picture of one of the tables. We see Chrissy and Jim. We see Bob and Leslie. And the girl in the red is a nurse friend of Jill's who comes from Clarion, Ohio. Clarion, Pennsylvania, excuse me. Uncle Perry, Aunt Helen, Uncle Lou, Marie, and Nanny. The center of the picture in the gray dress is Frank's mother, Mary. Alright, we have Aunt Helen's brother Rocky and his wife Vera, and Helen's sister Gloria talking to Nanny. The cake. Mr. and Mrs. Cy Rankowitz dancing. The bride and the groom. Jill talking to some of the guests. Vera Romano and Nanny dancing. Oh, another mistake. Jill and her dad as they prepare to walk down the aisle. Nanny and Dad. Annie and Dad. Frank, Jill, Aunt Helen, and Uncle Perry. Jill at the reception. Our table at the reception, you can see my back in the right-hand corner. Then we have Mr. and Mrs. McCormick and Mr. and Mrs. Rankowitz. This picture of the table where the cousins were sitting in the left-hand corner. I don't know whether that's Ralph or Bob. No, I think it has to be Ralph. Then Jim sitting back in the back. Perry Ann, her guest Ted, and then down in the right-hand corner, Bob and Leslie. Jim dancing with Jill. Jim and Jill. Dancing with her dad. Jim dancing with Katie. And her dad again. Jim standing talking to someone. At the center of the picture we have Jill's nurse friend from Pennsylvania. Me and Mr. and Mrs. Joe Treating. Dixie and Loie. Jill and Aunt Helen having a discussion. To end this presentation, we will use some of the leftovers that we didn't know where to fit in anyplace else. This is a picture of the house right after we had the aluminum siding put on. G trailer, our first camper. That's all, folks. Oh.